guys, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to The Wandering Reader. Today I'm going to be doing my December book wishlist video. This is a series that I started on my channel in November and was inspired by Karen over at Rather Rereading. Nearly forgot her channel name then. She does this video, but she talks about all the books that she's put on her to read list on Goodreads, whereas I'm going to talk about the books that I put on my wish list on Amazon. So I put 31 books on my wish list in the last month, which is crazy. So I'm going to try not to make this video too long, but give you an idea of what sort of books I put on there and why. So the first book that I want to talk about is called Still Life, and this is by Louise Penny. This is a book that I saw Jess talk about over on her channel, Jess McGlynn I think it is. And she bought this book I think when she was over in America recently, and it is the start of the Inspector Gamache sort of mystery series, and she had nothing but good things to say about it, so it sounded really intriguing, so I put it on my wish list. Next up I've got Amy, My Daughter by Mitch Winehouse, and I can't remember whose channel I saw this on, but I think they were kind of wrapping up what they'd read in Non-Fiction November and they mentioned reading this book, so I apologise to whoever it was. I can't remember which channel I saw it on. But I did really like Amy Winehouse as a singer, and it was such a tragedy when she died, and this person talked about the fact that this is obviously written by her dad, and had some good things to say about it, so it sounded intriguing. I do want to read a little bit more about her life, so I put it on my wish list. Next up is Fragile Lives, Heart Surgeon Stories of Life and Death on the Operating Table by Stephen Westerby, and this was a book that was recommended to me in the comments of my review video for This Is Going to Hurt. So I talked about the fact that I'd quite like to read some non-fiction that's very similar to this, and somebody recommended this one, and it's, as it says, you know, it is written by a heart surgeon, and he talks about different stories to do with his experiences in that job. Next up is Moonrise by Sarah Crossan, and this has been recently shortlisted for the Costa Children's Book of the Year award, and I was having a look through the nominations in all of the different categories and I came across this one and sort of had a little bit of a read of it, and it sounded really good. I believe it's told in verse, which is really intriguing, and I believe she's written other books that are told in verse as well. I think that's the case, so that really intrigues me, so I put it on my wish list to see if it would be any good. Then I've got Dead Until Dark, a True Blood novel by Charlaine Harris, and I believe I saw this book on Sarah's channel from Sarah's Nightstand. I believe she did a video on book series that she hasn't finished. I think it was her, and she talked about the fact that she's read quite a few of these books and that she really likes them, so I put the first one on there to see if I would like it as well. Next up is Do No Harm, Stories of Life, Death and Brain Surgery by Henry Marsh. This was another one that was recommended to me in the comments of my This Is Going to Hurt review. This is very similar, but it is a brain surgeon's stories. So again, that sounded really interesting and I thought I would give that one a go. And then a third one that was recommended to me in the comments of that video was Furiously Happy by Jenny Lawson, and I have heard quite a few other people talk about this book and say that it's really good, but the person that was talking to me in the comments was talking about the fact that this is about mental health and mental health issues and that sort of thing, and that sounded really interesting, so I put it on my wish list. Next up is Changeling, and this is by Victor Laval, and this is a book that Russell from Ink and Paper blog is reading in January for his Around the World book club that he's starting up on Goodreads next year. And the blurb on this sounds really, really good. So it says, the wildly imaginative story of one man's thrilling odyssey through an enchanted world to find his wife, who has disappeared after having seemingly committed an unforgivable act of violence. So that sounds really intriguing. The fact that it's called The Changeling reminds me of the fact that I've just read The Good People by Hannah Kent. So yeah, I don't know whether I'll be ready to pick this one up in January, but it's definitely something that intrigues me for the future. Next up is a book called A Golden Age, and this is by Tamima Anam, and I believe I saw this on Russell's channel as well, and the cover on this is absolutely stunning, so that drew me in to begin with, and then the blurb sounds really interesting too. So it says, Spring 1971, East Pakistan. Rehana Haque is throwing a party for her beloved children, Sahal and Maya. Her young family is growing up fast and Rehana wants to remember this day forever. But out on the hot city streets, something violent is brewing. As the civil war develops, a war which will eventually see the birth of Bangladesh, Rehana struggles to keep her children safe and finds herself facing a heartbreaking dilemma. So that whole kind of premise sounds really interesting, and I'm hoping to love that too. Next up is a book called Bird by Bird, Instructions on Writing and Life by Anne Lamott. And I believe I heard Amanda talk about this on her channel Cook, Read, Create. I think she was doing a book haul, and I think she mentioned this as being a book that she already owned and that she would really recommend. I do eventually maybe want to do some writing. I don't know whether anything will come of it, but I'd like to kind of give it a go, and she recommended this as a good one to pick up for, you know, people looking for inspiration and tips and that sort of thing, so I thought I'd add it to my wish list too. And then a book that she did haul in that video was The Creative Writer's Handbook by Katie Danes and Megan Coulis. And this, when she had a flick through it on her channel, looked like it was aimed more at sort of middle grade or high school. I think it was more sort of middle grade. But the way that it was formatted just made it look like it would be something quite fun to have. And, you know, just because it's aimed at a different year group doesn't mean that you wouldn't be good for you too. So I thought I'd add it to my list as well. Next up I have got Hell's Angels, and this is by Hunter S. Thompson. I believe it was Vicky from Chapter 32 in the comments of my November book wish list video. She talked about the fact that if I was going to read Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, then this would be a good one to go alongside that. And I believe this is about the writer who followed the motorcycle gang, the Hells Angels, for 1 year during the 1960s, and it's just about kind of what went on during that year and documenting what it was like being part of the gang and things like that. So that sounds fascinating. Next up I've got Girl in the Woods by Aspen Mattis, and I believe I saw somebody talk about this as being like a book to pick up if you enjoyed Wild by Cheryl Strayed, which I absolutely love that book. I think this is about a woman who hikes from Mexico to Canada, I want to say. Yeah, and it's sort of like a coming of age story, a survival story, and about sort of her hike along that very extended route. So that sounded like it would be something that I would enjoy. Next up I've got a book called When She Woke by Hilary Jordan, and I believe this is for fans of The Handmaid's Tale. So the premise of this sounds really good. It says Hannah Payne is a red, her crime murder, and her victim says the state of Texas was her unborn child. Lying on a table in a bare room, covered by only a paper gown, Hannah awakens to a nightmare. Cameras broadcast her every move to millions at home, for whom observing new chromes, criminals whose skin has been genetically altered to match the class of their crime, is a sinister form of entertainment. Hannah refuses to reveal the identity of her father, but cast back into a world that has marked her for life, how far will she go to protect the man she loves? It says it's an enthralling and chilling novel from the author of Mudbound for fans of The Handmaid's Tale and The Scarlet Letter. So I'm rereading The Handmaid's Tale at the moment and rediscovering how much I love that book. So this sounds like it's going to be really interesting, and I'll really like it too. Next up I have got The Leavers by Lisa Ko. I believe I read an article about sort of like the top books of 2017. I think it was, I can't remember which website it was on now, and this came up, and I have heard a lot of people talk about it on BookTube. And this is, I believe, about a mother and son who have immigrated over to the United States. And one day the mother goes to work and she never comes home again, and then eventually the boy is adopted by a white family. So I think it's sort of about the mystery surrounding where his original birth mother went, and sort of about growing up in a white family in America but being a Chinese immigrant, and the kind of conflict going on there. So I've heard people talk about this and say nothing but great things about it, so I'm looking forward to picking that one up. Next Next up is, again on that list, was Sing Unburied Sing by Jesmyn Ward. I've heard Russell talk about this book as well as a couple of other people as well, and it won the National Book Award this year. So yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a great book. From the little blurb, it says, an intimate portrait of a family and an epic tale of hope and struggle. Sing Unburied Sing examines the ugly truths at the heart of the American story and the power and limitations of family bonds. So Russell, I think, has read it and said some good things about it, so I always trust his recommendations. Then I have got The Only Thing Worse Than Me Is You by Lily Anderson, and I've been binge watching Kerin's sort of book Marchers to Read series recently, and this is a book that she talked about months ago now, but the premise of it sounded really intriguing. So it says Trixie Watson has two very important goals for senior year: to finally save enough to buy the set of Doctor Who figurines at the local comic book store, and to place third in her class and knock Ben Weston, his horrendous new moustache that he spent all summer growing, down to number 4. So I believe it's about kids in a boarding school, and it sounds kind of like it's going to be a little bit nerdy, but sort of about their coming of age story, and she made it sound like it was going to be a good one to pick up. Next up I have got First and Then by Emma Mills, and I can't remember who it was, but I was watching somebody's video and they were talking about all of the Sarah Mills books that they'd read, and talking about how great she was as an author. So this is the first book that she's written, and it says here, Devon Tennyson wouldn't change a thing. She's happy watching Friday night games from the bleachers, silently crushing on best friend Gaz, and blissfully ignoring the future after high school. But the universe has other plans. It delivers Devon's cousin Foster, an unrepentant social outlier with a surprising talent for football, and the obnoxiously superior and maddeningly attractive star running back Ezra, right where she doesn't want them. First into her PE class and then into every other aspect of her life. Pride and Prejudice meets Friday Night Lights in this contemporary novel about falling in love with the unexpected boy, with a new brother, and with yourself. So that whole thing about Pride and Prejudice meets Friday Night Lights makes it sound like it's going to be quite good. Next up I've got Shadow House The Gathering by Dan Pawlowski. I think that's how you pronounce that. I recently watched April from April Sarah's channel. She did a New to Me Authors in 2017 video, and she mentioned this book, and I believe it's part of a series, but this is the first one. And she said it was the scariest kind of haunted house book that she'd read in a long time, so that was enough for me to put that on my wish list. I don't read a lot of scary books, but yeah, the cover really intrigues me too. She also put on that list A Wounded Name by Dot Hutchinson, and said that this was a Hamlet retelling told from the point of view of Ophelia, and that really intrigued me, and the cover I think is absolutely stunning, so I put that on my wish list too. Next up, I can't remember where I saw this book, but this is A Magic Dark and Bright by Jenny Adams Perinovic, I think that's how you pronounce that, and this is about a woman who's working in an asylum, and that whole thing about asylums really intrigues me. So I'll read you the little description. It says, she meant to help a ghost, not unleash a curse. Amelia Dupree hasn't seen the woman in white since the night her brother died. The ghost seems to have disappeared from the woods surrounding Asylum, Pennsylvania. Okay, so it's not set in an asylum, it's set in Asylum, Pennsylvania. That's so stupid. That is until Charlie Blue moves into the creepy old McAllister house next door. Amelia can't help liking him, even though she spent her childhood thinking his grandmother was a witch. And she definitely can't ignore the connection between his arrival and the woman in white's return. Then Amelia learns that the woman in white is a prisoner, trapped between the worlds of the living and the dead. Devastated by the idea that her brother could be suffering a similar fate, Amelia decides to do whatever it takes to help the woman in white find peace, and Charlie agrees to help her. So that sounds kind of spooky. I like that kind of atmosphere, and it's not about an asylum, it's about the place asylum. Whoops. Next up, I believe I saw an article about sort of award winners this year recommending their favourite books that they've read, and I can't remember who recommended this, but it sounded really intriguing. It's called Sleepers by Lorenzo Carcaterra, and this is a book about 4 boys growing up on New York's West Side, and about one of their pranks misfired and a man nearly died, and they were sent away to a reformatory school. There they suffered the worst abuse the guards could inflict on them. 11 years later, 2 of them become killers for the mob, and they met the ringleader of the guards who abused them and shot him dead in front of several witnesses. and apparently this has been made into a movie, so this sounds like it's going to be absolutely fantastic and I can't wait to read that. Then I put on my list The Green Mile by Stephen King. I haven't read anything by Stephen King, but I absolutely love the movie of The Green Mile, so I thought this might be a good place to start with him, just because I love the film so much and I know the story. Maybe that'll make me kind of get used to his writing style and see whether that I actually enjoy it. Next up I have here Songs of the Humpback Whale by Jodi Picoult. I saw Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand do a book haul and she is collecting Jodi Picoult's books, and it reminded me of the fact that I really liked her work, so I had a little look at which she'd written first, and this was the first book that she's written. It doesn't have great ratings on Goodreads, but I thought as it was her first I'd give that one a go. Then Lisa from Books and Smiles recently did a video where she talked about series that she's finished this year, and one of the books from that list was Angelfall, which is the Perrin and the End of Days book 1, and I believe this is a trilogy. And this, I believe, is sort of like post-apocalyptic, so it says it's been 6 weeks since the angels of the apocalypse destroyed the world as we know it. Only pockets of humanity remain. Savage street gangs rule the day while fear and superstition rule the night. When angels fly away with a helpless girl, her 17-year-old sister Penryn will do anything to get her back. So Lisa had good things to say about the series and I always trust her recommendations, so I added that to my list. Another one that I added to my list from that video was Dissonance by Erica O'Rourke, and this kind of reminded me of Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. So it's about a girl and every decision that she makes she leaves behind sort of like an echo of her, who, if she didn't make that decision, what life would her path go down, if that kind of makes sense. So that sounds really, really intriguing. There you go guys, they were all of the books on that I put on my wish list this month. Love to have a chat with you in the comments below. Have you read any of these? What did you think of them? Thanks very much for watching and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.